She wasn't supposed to touch the rifle. She was just the weather girl on a sniper range filled with military legends, but then she asked for one shot and broke a 20-year world record in front of the general who erased her father's name from history. What happened next exposed a cover-up buried for 8 years. Stay until the end, because this rookie didn't just rewrite the rulebook, she rewrote justice. This is Veteran Biker, and it starts with a trigger. The first thing they noticed was that she had no patch. No unit insignia, no campaign tabs, no custom gear. Just standard issue BDUs, a faded cap, and a clipboard clutched in her left hand like it held the answers to the world. Her boots were regulation, scuffed in ways that didn't suggest combat but long hours on concrete. She didn't swagger like the others, she didn't speak unless asked, and she didn't sit with the rest of the range personnel during the morning briefing at Fort Bannon. Instead, Celia Ward stood off to the side, quiet, eyes sharp beneath the brim of her cap, taking in every word from Master Sergeant Beckett Shaw as he outlined the extraction scenario that would form the backbone of this week's long-range marksmanship exercises. "We're talking real-world variables," Shaw said, voice roughened by sand, smoke and shouting. "Mountain terrain, wind shears, cold fronts. You'll have one shot from over 3,000 meters. If you miss, our people die." The room of shooters, most of them decorated, seasoned and accustomed to this kind of hyperbole, gave the usual nods. Lieutenant Ethan Cole reviewed the satellite imaging with quiet focus, while Specialist Mason Cruz leaned back in his chair, legs splayed, grinning like someone who already knew he'd be the one on the trigger. He tapped his name patch with mock humility. "Guess that's why you brought in the big guns." No one looked at Celia. They hadn't looked at her since she arrived on base 4 days earlier, with orders stamped observation and data support. That translated into grunt work, logging wind speeds, humidity, air pressure, and updating range calculations while the real shooters did their thing. Most assumed she was fresh from logistics school, maybe a weather corps attachment, definitely not a trigger puller. She didn't correct them. When the assignments were passed out, Shaw's gaze passed right over her as expected. Cruz, Cole, Harper, primary rotations. Ward, you're staying on range 3 for data monitoring. No deviations. That's all. As the group broke to prepare, Celia kept her steps measured, clipboard tucked against her ribs. She passed by Cruz, who called out, "Hey, weather girl, don't forget to log my breeze when I break your record." Laughter followed her all the way to the far side of the range. She didn't react, not with a smile, not a frown, not even a flicker of irritation. But inside she logged his voice, the cadence of it, arrogant, dismissive, confident in a way that didn't bother checking the wind flags unless they fluttered across his ego. At range 3 she unfolded her stool, aligned the meteorological sensor array, and went to work. The wind was trickier than usual, gusting across the treetops at one angle but shifting groundward in a cross pattern. Even before noon she knew most of them wouldn't hit consistent groupings at anything past 2,500. She wrote it down, she wrote everything down, and all the while she was calculating, watching the flags, watching their postures, watching them miss. She tracked bullet impacts from a distance, her ears tuned to each sharp report and its corresponding delay. When Specialist Cruz missed his third shot in a row at 2,900 meters, his spotter muttered something about air pressure. Celia didn't laugh. She quietly marked the shift in barometric pressure and corrected it in her side notes. By mid-afternoon, the frustration across the range was palpable. Shooters cursed their scopes, the wind, the mirage. Targets beyond 3,000 meters became exercises in ego more than execution. No one came close to the record. Cruz grew quieter, grimmer, retreating into a muttering spiral of recalibrations and overcorrections. Celia, meanwhile, remained invisible. except to the variables, every gust, every flicker of grass, every shift in ambient pressure. She logged it all while the others hunted distance with brute force and pride. When a cold front rolled across the ridgeline and dropped temperature by 2 degrees in less than 5 minutes, she was the only one who adjusted the readings. She didn't need the rifle in her hands to know how they were missing. When the session ended, she returned to her temporary bunk with a full notebook and a mental map of every shooter's flaw. Cruz anticipated recoil and leaned back too soon. Cole trusted his optics too much and overcompensated at elevation. Harper was solid, but his timing faltered under unpredictable gusts. Celia remembered her father's voice then. "Don't just shoot. Listen, the wind talks. The land breathes. The shot is only the end. Understand everything before it, and the bullet follows." Back then, she had barely been tall enough to hold his rifle steady, but he had made her learn the variables before he let her pull the trigger. She wasn't allowed to fire a live round until she could calculate bullet drop in her head faster than he could with a ballistics calculator. Now, years later, her mind moved through formulas like breathing. That night, as the others drank and argued in the mess, Celia sat alone in her quarters, reviewing her notes, replaying their misses, and laying the groundwork for what she knew would come. She hadn't come here to be noticed. She had come to prove something. And tomorrow, when frustration reached its peak and no one else could break the 3,000-meter barrier, she would ask for just one shot. Not to show off, but because someone had erased her father's name from history, and this was where it would begin again. The next morning, the mood on the range had shifted. Gone was the casual banter, the swagger, the offhand jokes about easy kills. In their place, tension. The kind that creeps in when professionals realize they might not be enough. Master Sergeant Shaw stood beneath the operations canopy, one hand resting on a tablet displaying the topographic readout. His voice was clipped as he addressed the shooters. Recon teams have confirmed the extraction mission is a go for this week. Hostile observation posts are likely. That means we need suppressive fire from 3,200 meters minimum. Accuracy must be verified under active wind. A beat of silence followed. Lieutenant Cole stepped forward, jaw clenched, scanning the updated data. Elevation profiles tighter than projected. Thermal layering will distort optics by late afternoon. No excuses, Shaw said flatly. Your shooters. Adapt. Cruz muttered under his breath and headed to his station, flanked by 2 younger spotters who looked more nervous than ready. Across the firing line, Harper prepped his gear with quiet precision. Cole adjusted dials with practiced fingers but blinked faster than usual. He'd been up late reviewing footage. And Celia? Still on range 3. Still with her clipboard? Still ignored. The wind was worse than the day before. Low-level shears cut from the east, while mid-altitude crosswinds whipped from the northwest. Flags danced erratically, defying prediction. Even with advanced sensors, there were microbursts no equipment could forecast. You had to feel it. First up was Cruz. His rifle, a sleek, custom-modded Barrett, gleamed under the morning light. His stance was textbook, breathing even, posture solid. But Celia, watching through her compact binoculars, saw the telltale flicker in his grip. Too much pressure in the right thumb. Anticipating the shot, the target sat at 3,400 meters, a steel silhouette perched against a washed-out mountain backdrop. Cruz fired. A clean break, no hit. His spotter called for a 3-degree left correction. Cruz tried again, missed again. 4 more times he fired. 0 confirmed hits. He swore under his breath, reset, and stormed off the platform. Shaw said nothing, just wrote something on his pad. Cole was next, more deliberate, more controlled. His first shot struck high right. Missed by less than a meter, but in this range that was the same as shooting blind. The wind, Celia noted, had shifted 5 seconds before the trigger pull. Cole had hesitated. He fired twice more, still nothing on steel. When Harper took position, even the most confident among them held back their comments. If anyone could land the shot, it was him. Years in Arctic ops, the kind of man who didn't blink during windstorms. His first shot came closer than anyone's, but still no hit. Celia jotted down the time, 9:47 a.m., and still no one had touched the target. By midday, the silence around the range had grown brittle. Each missed shot was another crack in the myth of mastery. These weren't rookies, they were the best. Men who'd trained for years, deployed across continents, each with commendations pinned to their names. And yet, the steel silhouette at 3,400 meters remained untouched, unmoved, like it was laughing back at them. Master Sergeant Shaw didn't speak. He didn't need to. The tension hung so heavy even the range techs avoided eye contact. Celia remained at her post, seemingly dutiful in her wind logging, but in truth her eyes were always moving, watching the shooters, watching their reactions. She noticed how Cruz's jokes had dried up, how he now adjusted his rifle with short, jerky movements, how his pride had turned into resentment. She caught the way Cole studied his notes twice as long after each shot, then glanced toward her section as if trying to decipher a hidden variable he'd missed. And she didn't miss how Harper, the most composed of them, lingered after his final failed attempt, gaze locked on the target through his scope long after the range was called cold. They were breaking, not because they lacked skill, but because something they didn't understand was standing in their way. The wind, the range, or something else. At lunch, the mess tent buzzed with thinly disguised agitation. Harper said nothing. Cole buried himself in ballistics charts. Cruz, however, had enough left in him to look across the table at Shaw and mutter, "We need different conditions, or different expectations." Shaw didn't flinch. "No one's changing the terrain for you, Cruz." Then, as if on cue, Cruz's gaze drifted across the room toward the corner where Celia sat alone, eating quietly with her notebook open beside her tray. "What about her?" he said louder now, drawing attention. "She's got all the answers. Ask Weather Girl to take the shot." The laughter was nervous this time, not mocking, because somewhere deep in their doubt the possibility had begun to stir. Maybe she did know something they didn't. Shaw looked at her then. Really looked. Celia didn't blink, didn't smile. She just calmly finished her last bite, closed her notebook, and looked up to meet his gaze. She didn't speak first. She didn't have to. Shaw broke the moment. "Range reopens at 1400. Conditions will be worse. Winds climbing, pressures unstable." "Good," Celia said quietly. "I'd like to take a shot then." A few heads turned. Cruz scoffed. Cole paused mid-page. Harper didn't move, but he was listening. Shaw raised a brow. "You ever fired a 50 cal on a live range?" "Not this one," Celia said, "but I've hit farther." There was silence. Then Shaw nodded slow. 1400? Bring your own data. You'll use Lieutenant Cole's rifle. And just like that, the rules changed. The range had never been this quiet before a shot. At 1,400 hours, the shooters gathered not to perform, but to watch. No one said it out loud, but they knew something was shifting. The unspoken hierarchy was cracking, and in its place, a question was forming. What if the most dangerous shooter here had been carrying a clipboard all along? Celia walked onto the firing line with calm, deliberate steps. No dramatics, no speeches, just precision. Lieutenant Cole handed over his rifle with a neutral expression. "Zeroed for yesterday's humidity," he said. Celia nodded, already checking the scope, adjusting elevation. "It's dropped 3%. I'll correct for it." Specialist Cruz leaned against the side post, arms crossed, clearly expecting a spectacle. "Let's hope she doesn't knock herself off the mat." But no one laughed. Celia didn't respond either. She unfolded her shooting mat, not regulation issue. It was handmade, cut slightly wider, thicker at the elbows. She laid it down with care, then pulled a compact wind chart from her pocket. Not printed, hand-drawn. Dozens of tiny symbols lined the page. As she settled into position, she performed a strange, almost ritualistic hand gesture into the air. Fingers open, palm angled, she read the wind like braille on air currents. It was something no one had seen before. Lieutenant Cole narrowed his eyes. "That's not field protocol." "No," Harper murmured beside him. "It's older." Celia shouldered the Barrett. 50 with grace that betrayed long familiarity, her breathing slowed. Not the rise and fall of nerves, but measured, meditative control. Her chest moved like a metronome. Even her heartbeat seemed to vanish from her fingers. Then, nothing. Stillness, so complete it was unnerving. A single breath, a single touch, a single trigger press. The shot cracked through the air like a whip. The recoil thumped. Dust kicked up from her mat. And then, silence. Everyone turned toward the far end of the range, where the steel silhouette stood, unmoving, 3,540 meters away. No one spoke, not yet. A second passed, then another, and then the range officer's voice came through the radio, stunned. Direct hit, center mass, confirmed. No one reacted at first, not even crews. They simply looked at the radio like it had lied. The digital feed flickered. The shot data appeared on screen. Distance 3,540 meters. Wind correction 7.1 degree. Vertical adjustment plus 2.6 degree. Time to impact 6.8 seconds. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Celia calmly pulled the bolt back, ejecting the casing. "Log it," she said. The range tech hesitated. Full name for the record? She didn't look up. Celia E. Ward. And that was when everything truly stopped. Master Sergeant Beckett Shaw's head snapped up. "Ward," he said slowly, his voice suddenly void of command, touched instead by memory. "Celia Ward?" She stood, unhurried, brushing dust from her knees. The spent casing lay gleaming in the sunlight beside the mat, a relic now. "Any relation to Gideon Ward?" Shaw asked, but his face already knew the answer. Celia handed the rifle back to Lieutenant Cole. "He was my father." A sound passed through the crowd, something between a gasp and a collective intake of breath, like a ghost had been named. Even Cruz, mouth half open with a joke that had died on his lips, fell silent. Gideon Revenant Ward, the man who had once held the world record for a confirmed sniper shot, 3,400 meters in mountain wind, the man whose techniques had been struck from the training manuals after a mission gone wrong, the man whose court-martial ended not in verdict, but in suicide. At least, that was the official story. Shaw's voice was low now, almost reverent. "Your Revenant's daughter." Celia didn't nod, she didn't smile, she just looked Shaw in the eye and said, "The record stood for 20 years, until today." Lieutenant Cole checked the digital log again, confirming the timestamp, the distance, the grouping, no errors, no discrepancies. He looked back at her, stunned. That was 140 meters farther than his record, in worse wind. "In a worse war zone," Harper added softly. Across the firing line, the silence stretched deep. No one knew what to say, because in that moment everything had changed. Not just the scoreboard, not just the name logged in the system, but the unspoken foundation of their own understanding. Because if Celia was telling the truth, if she had trained on her father's suppressed methods, and they worked, then maybe the record wasn't the only thing that had been buried. Maybe the story of Gideon Ward hadn't ended with disgrace. Maybe it had been stolen. Master Sergeant Shaw finally cleared his throat and stepped forward. "You'll report to my office after this," he said, not unkindly. "We need to talk about your file." Celia met his eyes again. "Yes, sir." Then, with the same calm she'd carried to the mat, she collected her clipboard and walked off the range. Behind her, no one moved, no one laughed. Because the ghost had returned, not in body, but in blood. And this time, she wasn't going to vanish. Shaw's office wasn't large, but it felt heavier than any hangar on base. Celia stood at attention across from his desk, hands behind her back, eyes steady. Shaw didn't ask her to sit. Not yet. He was still processing. The file in front of him wasn't hers. Not really. It was the sanitized version. The one labeled Ward, CE, with just enough detail to allow her through the gates of Fort Bannon without raising flags. Observation. Meteorological support. Prior duty stations vague, disconnected, technically accurate, structurally hollow. He finally looked up. I knew your father. Celia nodded. Most people here did. They just don't talk about it. Shaw tapped a finger on the file. Gideon Ward was the best shooter I ever saw, not just because of the record. He saw things in the wind no one else could, predicted pressure drops before they happened, said the bullet didn't just fly through air, it negotiated with it. She allowed the smallest smile. He used to say the same thing to me, said if you forced the shot, it fought you. I believed in him, Shaw said, until I read the report from Operation Iron Vow. Celia's smile vanished. The report was written by the same people who needed a scapegoat. Shaw sat back. According to the official record, your father refused a kill order during the mission, claimed civilians were present. Intel said otherwise. The order stood. He didn't take the shot. The extraction team came under fire. 3 soldiers died, and he was brought home in cuffs. Her voice didn't rise, but it struck harder than shouting. He didn't miss. He saw what others didn't. Civilians had entered the kill zone. He requested mission abort. Command denied. When he refused, they claimed insubordination. Shaw didn't interrupt. They locked him up pending court-martial. 2 weeks later, they said he hung himself in his cell. And you don't believe that. Celia met his eyes now. Do you? A long silence followed. Then Shaw opened a desk drawer and retrieved a second file, older, thicker, stamped classified, eyes only. He slid it across to her. I never believed he took his own life, he said. Not after what I saw in country, not after the way he spoke about that mission, but I wasn't part of command. I had no say. Celia opened the file. Inside were black and white photos, overhead surveillance, timestamps, communication logs. One satellite image showed a heat signature cluster within the strike zone, non-combatant size patterns, children possibly. It was scrubbed, she said, voice thin. Shaw nodded. Official record said nothing showed up. This file says otherwise. She closed the folder with trembling fingers. I've spent 8 years collecting what I could. Civilian accounts, intelligence leaks, internal memos. But I couldn't do anything with it. Not without proof. Shaw folded his arms. And now? Now I have it. A confirmed record-breaking shot, using his methods, on a base full of witnesses. They can't say it was luck. They can't erase it. Shaw leaned forward, elbows resting on the desk. 8 years is a long time to chase a ghost. Celia didn't flinch. I wasn't chasing. I was reconstructing. Every missed footnote, every erased field report, every whisper my father's name used to generate until they scrubbed him from the doctrine. You enlisted under another name, legally changed, she confirmed. Ward was too loud, too radioactive. No one would have let me through a military pipeline with that name attached. So you became Celia Ellison. Ellison is my mother's maiden name. I joined as a data tech. No one questioned it. People forget quickly when the story ends in disgrace. Shaw nodded slowly, eyes scanning her again, not for weapons or threat, but for truth. He found it, buried deep in her stance. She was steady, not defiant, just unshakable. You trained alone? He asked. I trained with memories, Celia said, with fragments of my father's notebooks, with physics textbooks, with ballistic software I rebuilt from old code. I reverse-engineered his methods from what they left behind. She pulled a small weathered field book from her breast pocket and laid it on the desk. Handwritten, thousands of entries, variables, distances, notations in symbols that weren't part of any standard manual. Shaw opened it and scanned a page at random. You kept everything. I had to. No one else would. And you waited until now to surface. Why? Celia met his eyes again, unwavering. Because your upcoming mission is a mirror image of the one that destroyed him. Same terrain profile, same range, same faulty intelligence, and the same refusal to acknowledge that not all targets are enemies. Shaw closed the notebook carefully. You're saying someone's setting us up to repeat Iron Vow? I'm saying it never stopped. My father refused to take the shot. He was eliminated. You're on track to make the same mistake. The room fell still again. Outside, the range was quiet. But inside Shaw's office, the weight of what she said settled like sandbags on concrete. You didn't come here to break the record, he said finally. No, she agreed. That was just the key. The record gets their attention. The truth keeps it. Shaw glanced at the old classified file again, the seal broken, its contents exposed. I've been sitting on this for years, he said, waiting for the right trigger. You found it, she replied. He looked back at her, not at the clipboard or the rifle logs or the notebook, but at the woman in front of him. And for the first time, Beckett Shaw didn't see the weather tech. He saw Gideon Ward's daughter, and she was just getting started. You'll need more than a record-breaking shot and a dusty file, Shaw said. Celia nodded. I know. She reached into her rucksack and produced a small encrypted drive. Slim. Matte black? No markings. She placed it on the desk like it weighed more than steel. This contains everything I've compiled, she said. Unredacted comm logs, SAT images, operational orders from the Iron Vow team, and unofficial testimony from 2 analysts who handled the targeting data before it was altered. Shaw didn't touch the drive yet. They've tried to erase my father's legacy, Celia continued, but they couldn't erase physics or truth. I've reconstructed his entire targeting methodology, proven it works under extreme conditions. And now that his methods are validated in front of this unit, under your watch, we have a platform to question everything that came after. Shaw's expression had shifted. Not just from skepticism to belief, but to responsibility. This mission coming up, he said, if what you're suggesting is true, there may be variables intentionally omitted from the brief. There will be, Celia said, just like before. They'll withhold civilian presence or unexpected movement in the target zone. The mission will go forward based on incomplete intel, and when it turns to chaos, the blame will fall on the shooter who hesitates. Just like they did to my father. Shaw stood now, turning toward the safe behind his desk. With practiced movements, he opened it and placed the classified Iron Vow file back inside, but not before removing a second, older envelope. Thicker, bound in red tape. He set it beside Celia's drive. This is everything I kept from my own time on that deployment, he said. I wasn't in his unit, but I was at the exfil point when things went wrong. I saw the aftermath. I saw the civilians. Celia's face tightened. And you stayed silent. I wasn't in a position to challenge command, he admitted. But I can now. Their eyes met across the desk. I need to be in that shooter's seat for the mission, Celia said. I need to be there when the order comes, so I can make the decision he wasn't allowed to make. Shaw didn't hesitate. You'll have it. He extended his hand. She shook it without ceremony. The plan was no longer hers alone, the fight no longer silent, and for the first time since her father was buried in dishonor, Celia Ward had someone standing beside her with the clearance, the clout, and the conscience to help her finish what Gideon Ward had started. By the time she stepped out into the fading light, a dozen things had already begun to shift behind the scenes. Files reopened, orders re-examined, schedules rewritten. Tomorrow, she wouldn't just carry a rifle, she'd carry a reckoning. That night, the light in Shaw's office stayed on long after most of Fort Bannon had gone quiet. Stacks of folders now lay open across his desk. Some standard, some so old the print was faded to grey. Celia stood nearby, arms crossed, silent, as Shaw reviewed each page like he was reading old wounds. "This one," he said, tapping a grainy photograph, "was taken the morning after Iron Vow. That's the kill zone, supposedly cleared. Look here." He pointed to faint silhouettes in the upper quadrant. "Heat signatures, non-combatant profiles," Celia said. "Kids, height-to-mass ratios confirm it," Shaw replied. "We never saw this in the after-action review. The images we got were cropped. These originals were buried." Celia didn't answer. She didn't need to. Shaw leaned back. "Your father filed a request for mission abort 3 hours before exfil. Cited probable civilian presence. Intel overruled it, claimed the village had already been cleared by local assets." "It hadn't," Celia said. Shaw's fingers traced a declassified comm log. His refusal to fire was filed as dereliction. That alone shouldn't have landed him in custody. But 3 men died during the exfil under heavy fire, and someone needed to take the hit, so they made it him. No, Shaw corrected, they made it easy. They already had the story written. All they needed was a name. He looked up now, eyes sharp. "But here's what I never told anyone. After Gideon was taken into custody, I was on a rotation near the detention wing. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I heard things. The night he died, there was no suicide watch, no video record, and the guard logs had gaps. I filed a discrepancy report. It disappeared from the system within 12 hours. Celia's jaw tightened. "You think they killed him?" "I think he was silenced," Shaw said. "I think when they realized he kept copies of logs, footage, unaltered SAT data, they couldn't take the risk." He nodded toward the drive Celia had given him earlier. "And now you have them." "They were scattered," she admitted, "encrypted in multiple backups. Some I only found through third-party signal intercepts. Took me years, but I never stopped." Shaw's voice dropped. "Why now, Celia? Why take the risk?" "Because they're about to do it again," she said. "The next mission matches every detail. Distance, terrain, atmospheric profile. The same template. And if there's even a chance they're withholding data again, I need to be the one at the trigger, or not pulling it." She nodded. Outside, the wind picked up. Distant thunder rolled over the mountains like the start of something old returning. Shaw stood, closed the folders and looked at her. "Then we need to make sure you're in that seat, and this time, no one's scrubbing anything." Shaw flipped open a fresh folder, this one marked with tomorrow's mission parameters. "Operation Stonevale. Extraction point here," he said, tapping the map. "Nestled in a valley at 3,200 meters. 2 known enemy overwatch positions, possibly a third hidden in tree cover. Our team moves in at 1,500 hours. They'll need cover before and during exfil." Celia studied the terrain. Rolling ridgelines, thick forest, patches of broken rock. Target zones are spread out. Any shot will require rotational recalibration. Shaw nodded. "And guess whose methods were designed to adapt mid-sequence?" She didn't answer. He didn't need her to. He circled a position on the map. A natural outcropping with elevation, concealment, and full triangulation over the valley. "This is your post. We've used it before. Line of sight is good. You'll have Lieutenant Cole as your spotter." Celia raised an eyebrow. "He won't like that." "He doesn't have to. He saw your shot. He'll adapt." Shaw paused, then added, "Just like the rest of them will have to adapt to your presence now." Celia let that hang for a moment, then asked, "And what happens when the briefing omits something again?" "When they tell me to take the shot and I don't?" Shaw didn't hesitate. "Then we don't hide it. I've already set up parallel reporting lines, one to command, one to external oversight. The second channel isn't military. You're going public, she said. I'm going truthful, he corrected. If they force the same scenario, they won't bury it this time. Not with this many eyes, not with your name on it. Celia exhaled, slow and deliberate. Shaw reached into his drawer and pulled out an old unit patch, one that hadn't been issued in years, a faded hawk stitched over wind currents. This was your father's, he said. His original team patch. Thought it'd be poetic if it flew again. He extended it to her. Celia took it without a word, fingers brushing the frayed edges. He wore it for every mission, Shaw added, even Iron Vow. I'll wear it tomorrow, she said, but not just for him. Shaw nodded. No, for everyone they never counted. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the darkened range. The truth has teeth now, Celia, and you just gave it fangs. She turned to leave, patch in hand, data in pocket, her role no longer denied but declared. Tomorrow they would put her on the ridge, and this time she wouldn't just be calculating variables, she'd be rewriting history, with the barrel pointed at a lie that had stood for far too long. The next morning, Fort Bannon awoke under a sky of steel-grey clouds. Wind cut low across the barracks, rattling loose signage and flags, as if the air itself sensed what was coming. Inside the command briefing room, the atmosphere was no less electric. The air buzzed with restrained tension, not from uncertainty about the mission, but from what wasn't being said. Every seat was filled. Lieutenant Cole sat near the center, arms crossed, jaw tight. Specialist Cruz leaned back with forced casualness, tapping a pen against his thigh. Harper, ever still, gave only a single nod as Shaw entered. He didn't waste time. Operation Stonevale is live. We launch at 1,430. Weather is deteriorating, barometric pressure dropping fast. Crosswinds will spike beyond 2,800 meters. Targets will not hold still. You'll need to thread the wind, not push through it. A map lit up on the display screen, 3 red triangles forming a loose perimeter around a narrow extraction valley. Our team will move in here, Shaw continued, gesturing. Primary overwatch position is this ridge. Closest range, 3,200 meters. Furthest, 3,480. He let the numbers hang in the air. No one spoke. Then Shaw's voice shifted, dropping into deliberate cadence. Specialist Celia Ward will take primary sniper position. The silence broke like glass. Cruz sat up straighter. You're serious? Deadly, but... She's already hit 3,540 in worse wind on this range using borrowed gear. Shaw cut in, and she did it on the first try. Cruz looked to Cole. Cole didn't look back. Harper simply said, she earned it. Shaw's tone softened only slightly. Lieutenant Cole, you're her spotter. Secondary cover will fall to Harper. Cruz, your rotation backup. Cole finally spoke. Understood, sir. His voice was level, but Celia caught the edge in it. Shaw turned to her final checks. In 1 hour, weapons are waiting at the armory. Transport leaves at 1,315. You'll reach the ridge on foot. Quiet insertion. Celia nodded. Yes, sir. As the team filed out, some casting looks of doubt, others of curiosity, Shaw stopped her at the doorway. You're walking into his ghost, he said quietly. I know, she replied. He held her gaze. Just don't carry his shadow. Carry your own. She said nothing more, but as she turned away, her hand brushed the patch stitched on her sleeve, weathered hawk over wind currents. It wasn't just her father's anymore, it was hers now too. The armory was colder than she remembered. Celia stood at the bench, methodically inspecting the Barrett Rad. .50 caliber assigned to her. This wasn't Cole's rifle. It was brand new, customized to mission spec, still smelling faintly of machine oil and anodized metal. Digital rangefinder, adjustable gas system, composite chassis. But Celia didn't trust features, she trusted fundamentals. She removed the smart scope and replaced it with her own glass, an analog Schmidt and Bender her father had left her, stripped of digital overlays, zeroed by hand down to the half-mil. The armourer raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She adjusted the cheek rest, balanced the bipod, tested the bolt for friction. Every movement was quiet, reverent, deliberate. Across the room, Lieutenant Cole was watching. He hadn't said much since the briefing, but he hadn't left either. Now, as she completed her setup, he stepped closer. "You're really not going to use the auto-calibration system?" "No," she said. "It'll drift in the upper gust layers." He frowned. "That's why we input corrections mid-sequence." "It's not fast enough," she replied, then looked up. "And it doesn't account for atmosphere stratification." Cole studied her for a moment. Then finally he nodded. Fair. It wasn't approval, but it was respect. By 1300, the insertion team gathered at the helipad. 8 soldiers in field gear, comms tuned, quiet. Celia checked her final loadout: rifle, notebook, ballistic charts, wind sensors, no digital assistant, no AI corrections, just instinct, memory and math. The ride into the mountains was short, loud and colorless. Steel trees below, thin air above. The chopper skirted cloud lines, slipping between ridge lines until it dropped low into a clearing. The team disembarked quickly. Celia, Cole and Harper broke east through a tree line, hiking the final kilometers on foot to avoid detection. The incline bit into her legs, but her breath remained steady. Her mind was already calibrating every gust, every shadow. The path narrowed as they neared the outcropping. Cole checked his watch. "We'll hit the ridge in 5. Celia didn't respond. She was already gone, mentally embedded in wind maps and shot angles, balancing temperature shifts with terrain bounce. Somewhere between thought and reflex, they crested the final ridge and the valley unfolded before them like a forgotten memory. And there, downrange, was the ghost. The same landscape her father had once faced, the same wind, the same silence. Only this time, she was the one holding the rifle. The overlook was a sniper's paradox, beautiful but lethal. From the outcropping, Celia had near-perfect visibility of the extraction valley. Dense evergreens lined the northern ridge. Broken granite littered the southern slope. 3 potential kill zones stretched across the terrain like scars. Narrow paths where hostiles might position or civilians might unknowingly walk into. She laid out her mat, not the one issued by command, but her own, worn, creased, folded the same way every time, just like her father used to do. Her rifle came next. She aligned it carefully, adjusting elevation and cant by feel. The wind wasn't consistent. Not even close. A low-level gust swept left to right across the valley floor, but up top it reversed, subtle, unpredictable. Celia didn't touch her scope right away. Instead, she knelt beside the mat, closed her eyes, and pressed her fingers gently into the dirt. 5 seconds. 10. A shift. Her breath slowed. She could feel the storm pulling in from the western range, dry air tumbling over wet roots, a warm pressure column rising just east of the target zone. Barometric drop in progress. She opened her notebook and sketched 3 quick wind diagrams, drawing lines like arteries feeding into a wound. Cole sat up beside her, unpacking the spotting scope. "Command says mission goes green in 30 minutes. Extraction team is en route. Radio check in 5. Celia nodded but didn't look away from the landscape. "You okay?" Cole asked. She finally glanced his way. "My father stood here," she said. "This exact place. Same trees, same valley, same wind." Cole adjusted the focus. "You think they're doing it again?" "I think they never stopped." He didn't answer that. They fell into silence, the kind that wasn't awkward, just necessary. Each of them preparing in their own way. At precisely 1447 hours, the comms crackled to life. "Overwatch, this is command. Extraction team entering primary ingress route. Confirm Overwatch status. Cole keyed the mic. Overwatch in position. Visual confirmed. No contact. Stand by. They watched as the small team moved through the lower trail. Disciplined, fast, shadows against the green. Celia adjusted her scope, tagging each potential hostile's nest. Then she saw it. Movement. Far edge of the east tree line. Not tactical, not armored. She magnified. Children, 5 of them, maybe 6. Moving carefully along a worn path that cut directly through the first target zone. No briefing had mentioned locals. No intel package had warned of possible civilians. Just like last time, her blood ran cold. She reached for the radio but hesitated, not from fear, from memory, because now she understood what her father had felt, what he had seen, what he had been willing to die for, and what she would have to choose again. She steadied her breath and zoomed in again. There was no mistaking it now. 4 children, 2 adults, no uniforms, no weapons, just loose clothing, packs slung over shoulders, and a sense of cautious movement. Refugees, maybe. Locals trying to skirt whatever conflict they'd sensed coming. They were stepping straight into the kill zone. "Cole," she said, low and clipped. He turned instantly, his eyes following her scope's direction. Grid mark? East sector. 45 degrees. Movement. Civilians. Cole frowned, adjusted his spotting scope, and let out a slow exhale. Confirmed. 5, possibly 6. 2 adults. They're in the lower corridor. That's primary target zone 1. He didn't argue. She switched to her radio, keying the mic. Overwatch to command. We have visual confirmation of civilians inside the designated target corridor. Repeat, civilians in target area. Static. Then command copies. Intel reports no civilian activity in sector. Proceed as briefed. Celia blinked once. Negative. I have eyes on multiple non-combatants. Request mission delay until they clear. Overwatch target priority confirmed. Extraction is in motion. Execute as ordered. The words hit harder than any round. Cole looked at her. This is it. She nodded slowly. This is exactly what they did to him. She shifted position slightly, her eye still in the scope, the crosshairs floating over a tree trunk behind the group of civilians. Her hands didn't tremble, her breath was calm, but her heart was screaming. He had been here, her father. He had seen them just like this, and he'd chosen not to fire. She lowered the rifle. "Command," she said clearly. "This is Overwatch. I am declining the shot." Civilian presence confirmed. Recommend rerouting extraction team or altering fire plan. The response was immediate and furious. Overwatch, that's a violation of direct engagement protocol. You are ordered to engage. Failure to comply will result in disciplinary action. I understand, she said, but she didn't lift the rifle. Cole sat back from his scope. You're going to be court-martialed. I know. You sure? She looked at him. I'm doing what he did. What was right? If they want to erase me too, they'll have to do it while the truth is still on the record. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The radio sputtered, more noise, more pressure, but then something changed. Cole reached down, activated the optic recorder on his scope and angled it toward the civilians. I'm documenting, he said. They won't get to bury this one. Celia gave a single nod. They waited and waited, watching lives move through crosshairs neither of them would pull. The radio went silent for a full 30 seconds. Then sharply, Overwatch, confirm copy of last transmission. Celia leaned toward the mic. Affirmative, refusal to fire. Civilian presence confirmed, standing by for alternate orders. No response. Cole adjusted the recorder's angle, his voice low. Still documenting. Below them, the extraction team was shifting positions unaware. The civilians, oblivious, continued to walk the narrow path, one of the children now skipping ahead through the brush. The timing was precise. The overlap was real. Celia knew this was the moment her father had faced. The same disregard, the same blind command, the same impossible choice. Only now she had evidence and a witness. Cole's voice was calm. Command won't back down, then we hold our ground. But then the radio crackled again. Different tone, different channel. Abort. Repeat. Mission abort. All units stand down. Extraction rerouted. Civilians confirmed via drone scan. Do not engage. Return to insertion point. Celia blinked. Cole sat upright. What? A new voice followed. Unfamiliar, higher clearance. This is Joint Oversight Authority. Authorization override issued based on confirmed visual records. Sniper Team Overwatch, report directly to Command Center upon return. Silence. Then Cole turned to her slowly, as if seeing the impossible. They aborted. They actually aborted. She didn't speak, just lowered her rifle fully and sat back from the scope. Down in the valley, the extraction team was already redirecting, circling wide. The civilians never knew how close they came. The moment passed, and this time, no one died. Cole checked the footage one last time. You think that was you? Or the recording? Celia looked at him. Both. And someone watching. They began packing in silence. The ridge that had once felt like a tombstone now felt lighter, not safe, not resolved, but changed. When they reached the evac point, Shaw was already there, standing alone, arms folded. His face was unreadable. Celia stepped forward. Sir, I accept full responsibility. Save it, he said, cutting her off. Satellite confirmation came in 5 minutes after your report. They were civilians. They weren't supposed to be there, but they were. He looked her in the eyes, exactly like Iron Vow. Her jaw tightened. But this time we didn't pull the trigger, Shaw finished, and this time we can prove it. Behind them, the chopper rotors spun back to life. Cole glanced over. What happens now? Shaw didn't hesitate. Now we reopen everything. The debrief room was dim and cold, intentionally so. Celia sat alone at the far end of the table, fingers laced, back straight. Her rifle had been taken for review, her notebook logged and copied. Cole was in another room giving his version, and Shaw? Nowhere in sight. The door opened. A new figure entered. Not base command, not tactical ops. A man in a civilian suit, pressed, understated, dangerous in its neatness. His face was forgettable, but his ID tag wasn't. Oversight Directive, Tier 1 clearance. He sat across from her, placed a file on the table and opened it without looking at her. You do realize, he began, voice flat, what you've just jeopardized. She didn't respond. He looked up. A mission greenlit by Joint Strategic Command. With executive authorization, there were civilians in the zone, she said. Your data was flawed, or your interference caused a breach in OPSEC timing. Her eyes narrowed. That's your angle? He smiled thinly. It doesn't have to be. We're flexible. But let me be clear, Specialist Ward, your footage didn't just prompt a mission abort. It activated international review protocols, Senate subcommittees, press monitoring. You didn't just save 6 civilians. You triggered scrutiny. Celia leaned forward. Good. He paused, assessing her like a risk profile, then flipped a page in his file. Your father, he said. Gideon Ward, Revenant. He triggered the same flags, said the same things, raised the same alarms, and look where it got him. She said nothing, but her pulse was spiking. Here's the twist, Ms. Ward, the man continued. You think the mission was aborted because of some moral line being crossed? That someone up there had a change of heart. He leaned in. No, it was aborted because your footage made it impossible to proceed. Because you sent encrypted backup to 3 international watchdogs the moment you pressed record. Because you forced our hand, not our conscience. Celia didn't blink. "That's not a twist," she said. "That's a confession." The man sat back. "Call it what you like, but let me explain what comes next. Your name will be cleared only if you play quiet. You'll keep your commendation, you'll keep your position, but you'll never speak of this again, publicly or privately. And if I don't," he smiled again, not kindly, "then your story ends like his." For a beat, silence returned. Then the door opened again. Shaw stepped in, slow and deliberate. "That'll be enough?" The man stood, bristling. "This is above your clearance." Shaw raised a small recorder and pressed play. The room filled with the man's own words. "Your footage didn't just prompt a mission abort. You forced our hand, not our conscience." Then he shut it off. "I've already sent it to Oversight Review," Shaw said. "The subcommittee will want to hear it in your own voice." The man froze. Then he walked out without another word. When the door clicked shut behind the oversight official, the silence that followed was heavier than confrontation. Shaw remained standing, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Celia watched him, still seated, but no longer tense. Something had shifted between them, not rank, not authority, something older, shared. "He always said they'd come smiling first," Shaw muttered. "Then come back with gloves off." Celia gave a dry breath. "At least now I know the rules." "There are no rules," Shaw replied. "Only power and what people are afraid you'll do with it." He moved around the table and sat opposite her. The overhead lights cast harsh shadows, but there was no hiding in here, no more pretense. "They can't bury this anymore," she said. "No," Shaw agreed, "but they'll try to contain it. Dress it up. Frame it as an isolated incident, a commendable act by a sharp-eyed soldier. They'll give you a medal, a promotion, maybe even an invitation to shake a senator's hand, and erase the rest, unless we don't let them." Celia studied him for a long moment. "You're really in this now?" "I always was," he said. "I just didn't know which way the wind was blowing." He reached into his jacket and placed another file on the table, thinner than before, but stamped with a new seal. "Joint Investigative Review. This is official," he said. "A formal inquiry into Operation Iron Vow, triggered this morning by your footage, your statement, and what I sent to Oversight Review. It's happening. You cracked the wall." Celia leaned forward. "What about the ones who built it?" Shaw hesitated. "That's where it gets dangerous. They've already killed once." He didn't deny it. "Then we don't go quiet," she said. "Not now. We stay visible. We stay loud. And we make it so damn public they can't touch us." A ghost of a smile touched Shaw's lips. "You sound like him." She looked down briefly, then back up. "I've spent my whole life in his shadow, but now it's not about revenge anymore." Shaw nodded. "It's about restoration." Celia stood. "I'm not disappearing. I'll take the debriefs. I'll wear the commendation. I'll even pose for their photo ops if I have to. But the moment they try to spin this into another controlled narrative, I go wider. Every file, every voice, every truth." "You won't be alone," Shaw said. "Not this time." He rose, extended a hand. This time she took it, firm, unshaking. Somewhere beyond the walls of Fort Bannon, the machine was already moving. Gears grinding, papers being rewritten, names being reshuffled. But inside this room, the foundation had cracked, and it started with one shot that never came. 3 days later, Celia found herself standing in the echoing marble atrium of Joint Command Headquarters. The room was all glass and steel, built for intimidation. Tall ceilings, silent guards, and the ever-present hum of bureaucracy in motion. She stood alone near the central elevator, her presence drawing glances from aides and officers alike, not because of her rank, but because of the name now tied to hers. Ward. It was no longer buried. The brass had summoned her, not for a commendation, not for protocol, but because she had disrupted something too large to ignore, and someone important had taken notice. When the doors finally opened, a young officer gestured her in. "General Reeve is waiting." Celia stepped inside, the doors sealing shut behind her like a vault. 23 floors up, the office was understated. Power didn't need decoration, it radiated from silence. General Dalton Reeves stood at the far window, hands behind his back, gazing out over the Capitol skyline. A man built like an old statue, polished, immovable, meticulously unshaken. "Specialist Ward," he said without turning. "Or should I say, Ward, daughter of Revenant." Celia said nothing. "I must admit," Reeve continued, "your father's name hasn't echoed through these walls in a long time. Some thought it never would again. Some worked very hard to make sure it didn't," she said. That made him turn. The man's face was unreadable, neither cold nor warm, just disciplined. "You've created quite a disruption," Reeves said. "Footage leaked, oversight committees activated, a mission aborted mid-execution. Do you know how many channels I've had to answer to in the last 48 hours? I imagine fewer than my father had in the final 48 hours of his life." For the first time, a flicker crossed Reeves' features, something between irritation and calculation. "You're young, specialist, and driven. Admirable. But you've stepped into a world you don't understand. Your father made similar choices, and someone made sure he paid for them." Reeve took a step closer. "What exactly do you think you've uncovered?" Celia held her ground. "Enough to know you signed off on Operation Iron Vow's kill order. Enough to know you ignored Gideon Ward's request to abort. Enough to know you overruled confirmation of civilian presence and ordered the team forward anyway." Reeves' voice dropped, sharp as a knife. "Careful, accusations like that can echo. So can bullets," she said. Silence hung. Then Reeves smiled, not kindly, not amused. "Let me give you some advice, specialist. Legacy is not built on truth. It's built on what survives scrutiny." Celia's eyes never left his. "Then you should be very worried about what's finally being scrutinized." Reeve moved slowly behind his desk, each motion deliberate, as if to reassert control through posture alone. "You're playing with documents you don't have clearance for," he said. "And names you don't fully understand." "I understand this one," Celia replied, pulling a small hard case from her satchel. She set it on the desk and flipped the latch. Inside, a printout sealed in plastic, already notarized by Oversight Review. She slid it toward him, signed targeting order. Dated 36 hours before Operation Iron Vow commenced. Not by field command, not by tactical analysis, but by strategic liaison, Tier 0. She tapped the signature line. "Dalton Reeve." He stared at it, unmoving. "That proves nothing," he said finally. "Authorization does not equal liability. It does when paired with the comm logs." She opened a second file, transcripts from a declassified audio relay, words spoken in a secure room, time-stamped, clean. "Gideon Ward, sir. I have civilian heat signatures in Zone Alpha. Unknown, proceed. Intel stands, no abort, no delay." Reeves' face was stone, but Celia didn't stop. "I ran the voice pattern through 2 forensic databases, cross-matched with a sample from a briefing you gave in 09. It's you. And that's your voice denying the warning. You manipulated a classified audio file?" "No, I exposed one." He leaned forward now, quiet fury in his stare. "You think this is justice? Some noble crusade to clear a dead man's name?" "No," she said. "I think it's accountability. The thing you erased along with my father's clearance, his rank, and eventually his life." He reached for the folder, slow, as if to tear it apart, page by page, but the door opened. Both of them turned. Beckett Shaw stepped in. Behind him, another figure followed. An older woman in a dark navy suit, her ID badge clipped to her lapel. Office of Military Ethics and Oversight. She didn't wait for permission. "General Reeve," she said, "you are hereby requested to recuse yourself from all active command responsibilities pending internal review. We have reasonable grounds to pursue a formal ethics investigation tied to the Operation Iron Vow debrief process and subsequent actions surrounding the court-martial of Specialist Gideon Ward." Reeve stood slowly, towering. "This is political theatre." "Maybe," the woman said evenly. "But it's also procedural, and right now you're out of stage lights." Celia watched him, not triumphant, not vengeful, just steady. He looked at her one last time. "You have no idea what you've started." "You're right," she said, "but I'm willing to finish it." Reeve left without another word. His boots echoed down the marble hallway like the last gasp of a collapsed empire. Behind him, silence reclaimed the room. But it was no longer his silence, not manufactured, not oppressive. It belonged to something older, something returning. Shaw closed the door gently and turned to the oversight officer. "How long do we have?" "Officially, 90 days to complete initial review," she replied. "Unofficially, you've got the world's attention for about a week before the headlines blur." She handed Shaw a slim drive. "Start with this. It's everything that wasn't burned after Iron Vow. Someone in archives had a conscience and a backup." She turned to Celia. "You forced our hand, Specialist. Now it's time we move with it." Then she left. Celia and Shaw stood alone again. He let out a long breath and crossed to the window. The light outside diffused through glass like a soft verdict. "You did it." "No," Celia said. "We opened the door, that's all." He nodded. "And what comes next?" "I want his name restored, his record reinstated. The Medal of Gallantry stripped from the man who lied in that debrief room, and his court-martial verdict publicly overturned." "That's a tall list." "It's not for me," she said. "It's for every soldier who's been buried under someone else's failure." Shaw gave a low half-smile. "You sound like you've rehearsed that." "I have," she said. "Every night since I was 15. They stood in quiet for a moment longer. Then Shaw stepped over to his desk and opened a locked drawer. From it, he pulled a small rectangular box, velvet-wrapped, edges worn. He opened it. Inside, a medal, tarnished, forgotten. "The original commendation," he said. "They revoked it, but I kept it, couldn't throw it away." Celia reached out, lifted it carefully. Her thumb brushed over the engraved name. Gideon E. Ward. Tears didn't come, not now. But something shifted behind her eyes, a weight that had long been held finally redistributing itself across something stronger. "What do I do with this?" she asked. "Whatever you like," Shaw said. "But if I were you..." He walked back to the window, staring out at the sky. "I'd wear it to the next mission. Let the ghosts see we're still standing." Celia looked at the medal one last time. Then she closed the box, slid it into her pack, and tightened the straps. Outside, the wind was picking up again. This time she was ready for it. The morning sun broke through the clouds with quiet defiance. Fort Bannon's memorial courtyard, usually a place of silent reverence, was now fully assembled. Rows of soldiers stood in dress uniform, boots polished, medals gleaming. No one spoke above a whisper. The air itself seemed to recognize the gravity of the moment. At the center stood the wall, black granite, etched with names of those who had given everything. And one name, until today, had been missing. Celia stood front and center, flanked by Lieutenant Cole and Master Sergeant Shaw. Her uniform was pressed, but her expression was raw steel. On her chest, beside her own regulation ribbons, rested the medal, her father's medal, tarnished but shining like truth unearthed. An officer from Joint Command approached the microphone. His voice, amplified yet calm, echoed across the courtyard. "Today we honor not just a soldier, but a correction, a restoration, a reckoning long overdue." He paused, allowing the silence to carry meaning. Gideon Ezra Ward, formerly Specialist First Class, 47th Long-Range Reconnaissance Group, was posthumously exonerated of all charges related to Operation Iron Vow. Independent review has concluded that he acted with integrity, restraint, and tactical foresight under conflicting orders and incomplete intelligence. Celia's jaw tightened. Her eyes didn't move. The officer continued, The following honors are hereby reinstated and made permanent: the Bronze Star with Valor, the Distinguished Service Commendation, and his confirmed world record for precision fire under hostile conditions, now formally recognized as active doctrine benchmark. A murmur of acknowledgement passed through the ranks. But the moment wasn't finished. The officer turned to the memorial wall and stepped aside. A stoneworker, silent, precise, approached with a small toolkit and a brass nameplate. Gideon E. Ward. There had once been a space on the wall, a blank rectangle where his name had been quietly removed years ago. Now, before everyone, it returned. As the worker secured the final bolt and stepped back, the name caught the sunlight and seemed to shine with its own weight. Celia moved forward. No ceremony prompted her. No script told her what to do. She simply reached out and placed her hand on the fresh engraving, felt it, and let it anchor everything that had once floated in grief and fury and silence. Behind her, the soldiers stood taller, even Cruz, even Harper. The name was no longer a whisper. It was carved. It was permanent. It was back. After the ceremony, no one rushed to leave. The silence that lingered wasn't uncomfortable. It was earned. Celia stepped back from the wall, the cool imprint of her father's name still fresh on her palm. She turned slowly, taking in the crowd. It wasn't just soldiers in formation anymore. The brass was there, the oversight teams, even a few journalists kept at a respectful distance, all of them witnesses now. She spotted Cruz standing stiffly a few rows back. Their eyes met for a moment. He gave her a nod. Nothing more, but it was the first time he'd looked at her without doubt, without defense, just respect. She turned to see Cole approaching. "You're not going to disappear again, are you?" he asked. "No," she said. "I think I've done enough hiding." Cole motioned to the patch on her shoulder. "That hawk's flying again. Not for revenge," she said, "for warning." They walked together in silence until they reached the edge of the courtyard. There, Beckett Shaw waited beside a small wooden box. He held it out. Inside, a replacement of the commendation medal she wore, a newly minted version, polished and untouched. "We had one made," Shaw said, "officially issued, a fresh inscription, clean chain of custody." Celia looked at it, then a tarnished original, still clipped to her chest. "I'll keep his," she said. Shaw nodded, then closed the box and tucked it under his arm. "I figured." He stepped aside, but then turned back. "There's something else," he said. "Command wants to bring you on as an instructor. Long-range program, not just because of what you did, but how you did it." Celia blinked. "Me? You've rebuilt something we let rot," he said. "It's time someone taught it again." She didn't answer right away. Her mind scanned years of silence, exile, and loss. The nights alone, the notebooks, the wind calculations written in the margins of food wrappers and mission briefs. Maybe she hadn't been training to fight. Maybe she'd been training to teach. She looked at the wall once more, at the name, the one they tried to erase. Still there, still shining. She turned back to Shaw and Cole. "Then let's get to work." They walked away together, the sun climbing higher now, cutting shadows off their backs. And as the wind rolled through Fort Bannon, it carried not ghosts, but something new, something that sounded a lot like justice. 2 weeks after the ceremony, Fort Bannon looked the same firing lines, same dust-coated trucks, same barked orders echoing off the range, but inside the long-range facility, something was different. Celia stood at the front of the briefing room, no longer an outsider. Her uniform bore the official patch of the Advanced Marksmanship Program. The hawk was now stitched clean, bold, and recognized. She faced a room full of new recruits, some wide-eyed, some skeptical, most unaware of the weight behind the lesson about to begin. She let the silence stretch before speaking. "Some of you have heard of me," she began. "Some of you haven't. That's fine." She held up a small white card, the kind used for target grouping analysis. "This is what they'll measure you by. Numbers, spread, Margin of error? They'll teach you math, wind, optics, and elevation. All good things, all necessary. She paused, then set the card down. But if you're going to last out there, if you're going to take a shot that matters, you need more than formulas. She moved to the board, uncapped a marker, and wrote 2 words: consequence, context. "This is what my father taught me," she said. "He wasn't famous because of the shots he took. He's remembered, finally, because of the one he refused." The room was still. No one shuffled. No one smirked. "Snipers aren't just tools," she continued. "Your judgment. You're the final variable in a system that will blame everything but itself when things go wrong. And sometimes saying no is the only way to do your job right." One hand in the back rose, shaky, honest. "Ma'am, is it true they tried to erase him?" "Yes," Celia said, "and they almost succeeded, because we let the doctrine bury the conscience." Another voice chimed in. "Then why come back here? Why teach this?" She looked at the cadet. Young, determined, the kind of mind that might one day face the same decision her father had. "Because you deserve better than what I got," she said. "And because every generation that follows deserves the truth." She walked to the side of the room, unlocked a steel cabinet, and removed a weathered folder, her father's old notes copied and compiled. She placed it on the table like passing a torch. "Welcome to the new standard," she said. "Class begins now." Outside, the wind moved gently across the range, but inside these walls something stronger had begun to take root, and this time it would not be erased. In the weeks that followed, the range transformed. Not in appearance, same targets, same terrain, but in principle. The curriculum shifted, the conversations changed, the phrase Ward method began circulating, not as rumor or rebellion, but as doctrine. Celia didn't just instruct, she rewrote. Working side by side with Lieutenant Cole and Master Sergeant Shaw, she developed a new tier of sniper training. One that emphasized not only ballistic excellence but also environmental reading, tactical ethics, and operational independence. They built case studies, classified debriefs from real-world failures that once had no names attached. Now they did. Gideon Ward's name was on every slide, every principle, not as a ghost, as foundation. Cole took over optics and field math. He was a natural with angles, elevation curves, and counter-rotation physics. What he once dismissed as overcorrection, he now taught with precision. Shaw handled judgment calls. His years in field command became gold for the recruits, explaining how sometimes the most heroic act was restraint. And Celia, she taught the wind, not just how to measure it, but how to feel it, how to hear it, how to see what no device could ever translate. She took her students into gusts they weren't ready for, gave them old scopes with no digital assist, made them shoot blindfolded after running the numbers, and more than once she made them lower the rifle and ask, "Should I?" One afternoon she walked past a new trainee struggling at the 2,800-meter line. The cadet was frustrated, angry at himself, the weapon, the math. "Nothing's working," he muttered. "Everything's off." She stood beside him, looking not at his hands, but at the flags. "What's the wind doing?" "It's left to right, 23 kilometers per hour. "No," she said quietly. "That's what the meter says. What's it actually doing?" He paused, watched the grass, watched the mid-tier branches. He blinked, cross-shear at mid-range. She smiled. "Try it again." He made the adjustment. The round rang true. Behind the scope, he froze. Celia clapped him once on the shoulder and moved on. Later that evening, in the instructor's lounge, Shaw poured 3 coffees. Cole raised his to Celia. "You ever think we'd be back here?" he asked. "No," she said. "But we're not just back," Shaw added. "We're building something that lasts." Celia nodded slowly, gazing out the window at the range. "No more ghosts," she said. "From now on it's names, real ones." They toasted in silence. And outside, the next generation stepped onto the line, unaware they were walking a path cleared by someone who once chose not to fire. and by doing so, hit the only mark that ever truly mattered. There are stories we inherit and stories we choose to finish. Celia Ward didn't grow up trying to become a soldier. She grew up trying to understand a silence, a name stripped from textbooks, a record replaced with a warning, a father remembered only in glances and lowered voices. And yet, with nothing but scattered documents, field notebooks, and the wind patterns written into her childhood, she rewrote the ending. Not with vengeance, but with precision. She didn't fire the longest shot ever recorded to prove herself. She did it to prove someone else had always been right. She didn't step onto that ridge to take life. She stepped there to protect it. In a system that rewards silence and condemns hesitation, she made hesitation heroic. She made no mean I know better. She turned disobedience into duty. She took the greatest weapon ever handed to her, truth, and aimed it at the structure that tried to outlive it. And when the structure cracked, she didn't walk away. She stayed. She taught. She trained the very institution that once rejected her name, because justice isn't the loudest voice in the room, it's the one that keeps speaking long after the shouting ends. Today, the name Gideon Ward isn't just on a memorial wall, it's on training manuals, on lesson plans, on doctrine footnotes, on the lips of cadets who never met him, but whose hands are steadier because of him. And Celia? She doesn't seek recognition. She doesn't chase headlines. She simply walks the line every day, clipboard in one hand, rifle in the other, asking each of her students the same question: are you ready to take the shot? But more importantly, are you ready not to? Because the hardest targets in life aren't always standing 3,000 meters away. Sometimes they're standing right behind you, in the orders you're given, in the silence you're told to obey, in the truth you're told to ignore. And sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is choose not to pull the trigger. And maybe that's what real strength looks like, not in the medals you wear, not in the shots you take, but in the ones you walk away from, because your conscience fires straighter than any rifle ever could. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved us while making it, then you already know the legacy of Gideon Ward doesn't end with his daughter. It begins with every one of us who chooses to stand, to speak, and to aim for something higher than orders. Thank you for watching this special story on Veteran Biker, where we honor not just those who fought, but those who chose when not to. If you believe stories like this matter, stories of honor, restraint, and justice, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And tell us below, would you have pulled the trigger? Or is there a moment in your life when silence became your loudest decision? We read every comment, and your voice might be exactly what someone else needs today. Don't forget to check out the other powerful stories now appearing on your screen. We'll see you in the next mission. Stay sharp, stay honorable, and ride with purpose.